Hi, everybody. Karen Roby here with Scott Fulton. And the last time we talked, Scott, on one of these videos here, we were talking about how Brexit could cause damage to the progression of 5G. And it does seem, unfortunately, like there are some other trouble spots in the world that could pose at least equal danger for the global telecommunications market. And beginning with, of all places, Poland. Explain.
Poland, Karen, is one of the newest emerging hotspots in this whole debacle, and I'll explain. Viewers may recall how in early September, the United States president skipped out on a trip to Poland. That made news for his skipping out on a trip to Poland, ostensibly to stay in the States to help take care of a hurricane problem, where the vice president went to Poland in his stead. What was left out of a lot of those stories is what the vice president was doing there in Poland. Well, the vice president, Mike Pence, signed an agreement on behalf of the United States, along with Poland, to help Poland abide by something that's called the Prague Agreement. The Prague Agreement is a 32-nation agreement. Poland's part of it, so is the U.S. It was signed back in May. And it's a pledge that none of the nations involved there would get involved with 5G with a country that has state interests in 5G to the extent that it might be able to leverage those interests to conduct foreign surveillance. Well, that's a not very hidden, not very well veiled reference there to Huawei, which is technically an independent company based in China, but it's still very, very much Chinese owned and operated. So the agreement there was to try to reinforce Poland's position there. And within days of signing that agreement, what happened in Poland is that it started tests of 5G in Warsaw, along with Ericsson, which is one of the big three 5G equipment suppliers in the world, and with Orange, the French telecommunications company. So it's building European 5G in Poland, and wonder, what does that matter? Well, Russia sees that as an affront, as a threat to its, not only its market position, but its position as a leader of other nations. And so what it did is try to reinforce the agreement that it has put in place with not only China, with Xi Jinping, their leader there, but with Huawei. And that agreement helped reinforce the situation where now you're seeing 5G tests being built up in neighboring countries. And forgive me if I'm relying on my notes here, but we're setting up Russian 5G tests in neighboring countries of Belarus and Ukraine. Ukraine is a lot of our viewers may be aware, is kind of in a tentative position with Moscow right now, on account of some years back Russia having annexed the Crimean region. But right now things seem to be on a more placid state of affairs, where they can help build up their technological lead, and that's bringing the Russian 5G front, if you will, to the West. What's happening inadvertently or advertently, as the case may be, is the creation of a kind of 5G Iron Curtain. It's further to the east than the original Iron Curtain was, because Poland is a member of the European Union. And but what's happening as a result there is it's establishing this kind of barrier where if you're a traveler between these two sectors of the world, and you happen to have a 5G phone in the near future, you may have to switch out your SIM cards, because the way a phone contacts one 5G may be different from the way a phone contacts another 5G. And that's also setting up a situation where Russia is getting a lot tighter with China and starting a kind of a technological block where China has more of a way to influence, to exercise its influence in technology leadership. Remember, China helped start the whole 5G affair to begin with, so a lot of the intellectual property actually is Chinese.
And Scott, it sounds all nice, assuming that Eastern Europe plays well, with the rest of Europe and touching on Russia and China. But outside of that segment, who's impacted next?
Well, who's keeping a very, very close eye on what's going on in Poland and what happens situationally? Does it flip flop? Does it start to go with a more Eastern European friendly telecommunications standard, or does it stay with the emerging EU standard? Who's watching that is Vietnam. Vietnam is one of the emerging economies in Southeast Asia. Very, very high GDP growth. The job situation is doing very well in Vietnam. And right now, what they're wondering is, who do we go with when we build 5G? The original plan some years back was Vietnam could roll it alone. They would create their own 5G standards based on what was coming out from the global groups. Well, depending on where the countries stand and what happens with the Prague Agreement, that global agreement may be splitting up. So Vietnam is thinking, well, let's find a way to abide by the principles of the Prague Agreement while maintaining our own right of way, while being able to be in the driver's seat. So who they want to go with right now, who a lot of the Chinese industry wants, a lot of the Vietnamese industry wants to go with right now, is Samsung. Now, Samsung hasn't been mentioned very much in the 5G equation, because they are, as anybody watching the Democratic debates these last few weeks would attest, Samsung is kind of the Marianne Williamson of 5G equipment suppliers. And you think that's a pretty big name to have a fairly small effect. But analysts are saying right now that Samsung supplies maybe less than 3% of the world's 5G telecommunications equipment for transmitters and things like that. We're not talking about smartphones, we're talking about transmitters. Now, that could go as high as 20%, say some analysts, if they could get kind of a block going, a 5G block in the East Asian region, and this over here. And it would start with Vietnam. If Vietnam goes with Samsung, as it looks like it will, then the markets expand and other nations in the area may follow suit. And I'm looking at my notes again just to make sure I get the right ones. But Thailand is a nation that is keeping close watch to decide, do we roll our own 5G or do we go with somebody else's? If Vietnam goes with Samsung, maybe Thailand will go with Samsung. The Philippines is another possibility, although right now they have kind of signed heavily with Huawei. Malaysia has signed heavily with Huawei, so that boat over there has already sailed. But there are other nations in the region. The jackpot would be Japan. If Samsung could help capture the Japan market going forward, not only would they be able to create a really competitive 5G presence for themselves, but they might have an inroad into whatever this 6G will become, because a lot of what's being called 6G technology, specifically something called terahertz broadcasting, very, very fine frequencies we didn't even know existed until just a couple of years ago. That's being developed in Japan. If Japan signs on to this, suddenly there is a very competitive block with Samsung that can go toe-to-toe with Nokia, with Ericsson, and certainly with Huawei. And if that happens, then where does the United States fit in all of this? We used to be a technology company. Well, South Korea should be an American ally, you would think. We've been that before. We've got lots of Samsung products in the States. I use a Samsung phone, so I'm a Samsung customer. So you would think that things would be fairly copacetic, except North Korea has been testing short-range missiles. And short-range missiles don't have to attack very many places in the world to be effective. There's a very short list of anybody that North Korea would want to shoot with a short-range missile. And right now, the United States, in the form of its current president, is looking the other way as North Korea conducts these tests. And South Korea is wary of that and saying, we don't like that situation. Why is the United States playing silent? Why are they letting Kim Jong-un test short-range missiles? Because that's obviously a threat to us. And that can put us on a negative footing with regard to any commercial agreements that the United States and South Korea have going forward. So we're boxing ourselves in on the other side of the world.
Yeah, and obviously that's concerning, Scott, and how, now that can potentially impact our smartphone cycle here in the U.S. What do you think?
Well, we're not right now a major 5G equipment supplier. We have Cisco, and they're a small player. They're kind of the Pete Buttigieg, with all apologies to Mayor Pete for that. But that's kind of where they sit. They've about 5-6% of the global market right now. So we really have to think about what we do contribute to the telecommunications field, and we contribute phones. Apple is an American company, and right now they are among the giants on the device stage. Well, you talked to Larry Dignan just a few days ago about the Apple decision not to put 5G in its new round of iPhones, in the iPhone 11 series. That was a big decision. And they had to have made that decision several months ago, because when you go with a generation of technology for your phone, when you subscribe to one of these 3GPP plans, you're writing in stone what the architecture of your phone, your actual device, is going to be, where the antennas are going to be put in your phone. Because how you hold a phone affects whether it can pick up a signal. So if you're putting 5G in your phone, you have to be able to pick up multiple signals on different frequency bands simultaneously. And that affects the layout of what the phone looks like on the inside. It also affects the chassis, the frame of the phone, which acts as part of the antenna. So you have to know well ahead of advance what frequencies is your phone going to pick up before you even really start to produce it. Now, a lot of folks complained, I complained, not even being an Apple iPhone owner myself, when they took the headphone jack out of the iPhone. Well, why did they do that? People wondered. They did that so they could get some real estate inside the phone itself, because that jack sticks up a good half an inch. When you get that jack out of the inside, you've got room to play with, and you can add antennas inside the phone and help the signal quality, which is one of the reasons Apple did what it did. When you delay 5G by several months, by a year, by 2 years, you impede the design cycles of smartphones all over the world, including from Huawei in China, which is another one of the giants, but also including Samsung and Google and Lenovo from China. You're blocking them from being able to make decisions on where they want to go with this. And when you block the smartphone decisions, you block the consumer decisions as to whether they want to subscribe to 5G. And that affects the revenue channel from all the operators who want to try to sell people on these phones that they're now not going to have. They need to be able to reap a revenue stream from 5G right away. Otherwise, they're going to effectuate a loss in expanding their transmitters. They're going to lose money on that until they start selling more phones and more subscription plans to go with them. So whenever you have this kind of fracturing of the globe, as we're seeing, Eastern European bloc, Western European bloc, and now the possibility of a Southeast Asian bloc, on top of the Brexit problem we have, which is a European bloc, and whether or not the UK joins the US or the European bloc, you could have 5 possible standards worldwide. And if you have that, it's going to take a longer period of time for the smartphone manufacturers to decide how to build phones. And that means that anything that calls itself 6G, we're going to start talking about 2027, 2028 before that ever becomes a reality. And suddenly you have to downgrade your revenue estimates for telecommunications providers. And that affects the global economy as a whole.
Scott, so many, so many moving parts here. It's mind-boggling, and politics at play, of course, here. So, so much going into this for your analysis and your articles here for ZDNet. So we certainly appreciate that. And of course, you can find all of that on ZDNet. Thanks so much for watching.